be my Pragmatic Works slide deck, I assume.
Yes.
Wonderful, because I have two monitors going and I'm going to be sliding things over as I demo. So fantastic. All right, well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me today to talk about extended events. I know this isn't a new subject, but hopefully I'll be able to share with you some tips and techniques that are specific to analysis services. So as you know, this is Pragmatic Works, and we have basically three pipelines as I think of them: product, services, and training. I'm a senior consultant with Pragmatic Works. I work mostly in the area of services, but I do teach our analysis services master's class as well, and we all sell products. This is me specifically. I do not work for Microsoft. I work for Pragmatic Works, but I have chosen Microsoft as a career choice, specifically SQL Server. So Pragmatic Works sends me basically all over the country. I spend a lot of time on the road, and I do a lot of mentoring and training in all areas of the BI tool stack, including Power BI. I have a few Microsoft certifications, and on my spare time I do like to grab my camera and get out into nature and away from my computer. I would prefer to have posted pictures of my husband or my son Nate, but neither of them really want to be on a PowerPoint that goes out to the world regarding extended events. So we have some talking points today, specifically 6 of them. We're going to spend a couple slides talking about a 10,000-foot view of performance optimization with analysis services. I do SQL Saturday talks on this and training specifically on this one subject. I mean, we're going to cut this down to about 10 minutes instead of several hours. But we're just going to look at the high-level view and how both tabular and multidimensional cubes, what they have in common. We're going to talk about profiler versus extended events. We're going to talk about query log properties. That's a common misunderstanding, and I even did not understand that to start with, so I will share with you some things I learned. And then we're going to have 3 demos. I see that 76% of you have not used extended events, so we will spend most of our time there, but we will also be looking at profiler for several reasons. I also have an SSAS package demo for you that actually talks about warming the multidimensional cache. So we have a lot to get through in the next hour. What we're not going to talk about are all the things on this slide. If you're interested, there's so much you can do with extended events. If you're interested in page splits and uncommitted transactions and all these great database administration subjects, I would point you to a great talk and write-up by Jason Straight, and I've given you the link here. Our focus today is analysis services specifically. So if we jump into our 10,000-foot view, I don't own stock, I don't get any kickback, but I do recommend this book. Anytime I teach analysis services, it's just free referral. I've read it myself, highlighted it, stuck lots of tabs in it, and learned quite a bit. So I would recommend this book to you. It's expert cube development, and if you're working with analysis services and have done any research on the internet, you have heard of Chris Webb, Alberto Ferrari, and Marco Russo, and they are authors of this book as well. But basically, the 10,000-foot view of multidimensional cubes, when a multidimensional cube falls down in some area, it's usually in these top 5. You're missing hierarchies. You don't have proper partitions, often too many partitions. You don't have usage-based aggregations, and there's way too much MDX. MDX is a measure of last resort. You do need it for many things, but it's not your first solution. Your first solution should always be to push your business logic back to your ETL if at all possible. But today, of these 5 things, we're only going to talk about warming the cache as far as performance tuning multidimensional cubes. When we talk about cache, there is a misunderstanding on tabular cache. A lot of people think there isn't any, and that is not true. Multidimensional cubes are highly dependent on it, tabular models not so much, but it does exist as a result of MDX queries. However, I would not recommend that you go to the work to warm your tabular cache. As you know, tabular models are stored in memory, and that is the nature of the beast. Aggregations and calculations are therefore performed at query time. Multidimensional cubes act totally different. So they build formula engine cache when evaluating calculations, and they build storage engine cache with results of queries. So why is it important that we warm our multidimensional cache? Because after you process your cube, you have no cache. And the first user in the morning gets to do what? Warm the cache. So they kick off their report and they can go get coffee while the cache is warm. So as your analysis services database administrator, and I hope you have one if you're working with multidimensional cubes, if not, then I understand that too, because I have too had to wear several hats. It becomes your responsibility to make sure that does not happen to your first user of the day. Tabular models, this really is not an issue. So let's talk a little bit about tabular models. I gave you a book recommendation for multidimensional cubes, and I'm going to give you two of my favorite books for tabular models. I tend to refer to them as the purple book and the green book. But the purple book is a definitive guide to DAX, and you will see some common names who also wrote the multidimensional cube book. Also DAX patterns, even I do own this book, although you can get most of the content at www.daxpatterns.com. Again, I have nothing to do with that website, I just use it frequently myself. When we're talking about performance, though, for tabular models, basically we have 4 points of interest. I would probably weight number 1 at 75%, cardinality. This is where tabular models fall down, if they do, most of the time. Partitions, certainly. Memory limits, I've given you a screen print of the default memory limits. Honestly, I don't mess with these unless I'm trying to solve a specific problem. And of course you have hardware, because when you process a tabular model, where does everything go? Into memory. This does not work if you have 16 gigabytes of memory, generally speaking. So you need proper hardware to support your tabular models. But assuming that 2, 3, and 4, you're in pretty good shape. It's usually number 1 where I spend most of the time when performance tuning tabular models. There is a good MSDN white paper, and I've given you a link to that in the lower section of the screen if you want to actually dig deeply into tabular model optimization. But today, where do our multidimensional cubes and our tabular models have in common? Number 1 is always business logic. Always push that back to your ETL as much as you can. Just because you can use DAX and MDX does not mean that you should. You're going to pay a performance price for DAX and MDX. They are certainly necessary things, but that's not your first stop shopping for business logic. That is your ETL. When it comes to query performance, end user query performance trumps all. And I say that because oftentimes BI projects are led by an ETL team, and they want to get the ETL done as quickly as possible. The thing is, if you want best end user query performance, chances are you're going to write the check of development time in your ETL process, and you need to be willing to do that. What we're going to talk about today in performance tuning that applies to both is extended events, and that's why y'all have come today. Partitions, of course, relates to both multidimensional and tabular, but again, that's a different subject. And I also put snapshot fact tables up here because when I talk about performance tuning, I do talk about that as well. But today, we're focused on 2 things, extended events and warming the multidimensional cache, because those 2 are related. And working with extended events does give us an added bonus and an easy way to warm our cache. So why do we even care about extended events? Because we first of all want to monitor usage. So I know there's a lot of really good tools out there. I tend to like SQL Sentry. See, I'm giving all kinds of plugs to vendors that I don't work for. But I do like SQL Sentry to monitor usage, although I have not used it in several years. I have used it before, and it has all kinds of good information on it, including parameters for reporting services. But if I don't have a third-party tool, I can use extended events to decide who is using my cube, how often are they using it, what is the duration of their queries, what are their longest running queries, and I can really get a pretty good handle on my user pool. After you've taken the time to design a cube or a tabular model and deploy it, I mean, that's often a question that people ask. Okay, everyone's used to using Excel. Who's actually using all my hard work? And you can use extended events to answer those questions. As soon as a cube or a model goes out the door, however, you need to be proactive. I would strongly encourage you to start actually monitoring with long-running queries before your help desk phone rings. You can actually get ahead of the help desk. And what I like to do is use the data I collect with extended events and, yes, fire off an automated reporting services report where my storage and inquiry time and my query and inquiry time get out of sync. So I don't want somebody telling me I want to be proactive and have a reporting services email in my inbox. And I can also do that with my extended events data and, of course, the reporting services report. Last, why do we care? Because extended events gives us an easy win to warm the cache of multidimensional cubes. So let's talk a little bit about Profile to start with. The first thing I regret to tell you is that it's being deprecated by Microsoft. I feel this is a big fat bummer, but it is a 32-bit application. And we are going the way of the 64-bit apps. We all understand that. I will tell you though today, SQL Server 2016, you can still get to it. It works great, and I will tell you this, it is the fastest way to log analysis service query activity. So if I have a cube or a report or anything with SQL Server that's going on and I need an immediate answer, I'm going to spin up SQL Server Profiler even today because it is real time. I do not have to write out to a file, import that file, read that file, go through all the steps that we're going to go through with extended events. Now the downside is it is 32-bit. The footprint is certainly heavier. So it is not the solution for scheduling continued logging. All right, but it is a great short-term solution for one-off what's going on and to troubleshoot things on the fly. In the event selection window, keep in mind that with Profiler, it does come with what I think of as templates. So if you select to profile an analysis services instance, it will pre-select the events that are applicable to analysis services. The thing is, it doesn't select them all, and it does leave some key events out hanging, and it includes some events which just muddy up the waters. So you need to get to that event selection. We will do that together. We'll go to all properties and we'll actually pick things that are useful to us. When working with extended events in 2016, initially some people think this is a new 2016 feature. It is not. You could use XMLA in earlier SQL versions, and Chris Webb, again, has written a wonderful blog on that, on how to use XMLA even with SQL 2012. What's new is the graphical user interface. I'll try to be polite on this because I have chosen Microsoft as a career choice, but I'm not very impressed by the work that they did in SQL Server Management Studio. They have left out some key properties like restart automatically. You can't edit an extended event, and I don't quite understand why it was done, and let's use the phrase half-heartedly. I think that's politically correct. One thing that is easy to misunderstand right out of the gate, especially if you're moving from multidimensional to tabular, is when we talk about query logging, you will by default open up Management Studio and set up query logging in your tabular instance. And I'm going to show you how that works. So in front of you, I have Management Studio open. So here is my multidimensional instance. Here's my tabular instance. If I right mouse click on here and go to Properties and to General, I have these nice query logging properties that I feel like, oh, I can log my queries by setting up these properties just like I did with multidimensional cubes. Well, nothing's going to stop you from doing that, but you're going to probably log that to a table. And just for sake of example, I have a table here for OLAP query log tabular models, and if we select top 1,000 rows, we have absolutely nothing, and that is because those properties are not applicable to tabular models, even though they are in the tabular properties window, and therefore do not apply whatsoever. As you know, when working with multidimensional and you log queries through the multidimensional instance properties, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there. What you do get is what I tell you here on the slide. It's designed for usage-based aggregations. So when you're in Visual Studio and you're working with usage-based aggregations of multidimensional cubes, which do not apply to tabular models in the least, what Visual Studio does is it comes back here and it reads this log file, which, you know, how informative is that? You actually can parse it out, and if you go to CodePlex, there's a tool that will help you read that. But what all those lovely zeros and ones are is a list of measures and dimension attributes that were used in the query. It is not a select statement. So the only purpose and use for it is multidimensional cubes, usage-based aggregations. The end. But if you go to tabular, you're going to try to do that by default. But once you think about it, you're going to realize, hey, I don't even have aggregations in tabular models. This does not apply. I do not know why Microsoft chose not to hide or remove those properties of a tabular instance. But I just want to clarify that they do not apply here. So if you want to log queries of tabular models, basically you have 5 options. I recommend to you option 2A, and that's what we're going to do today. All right, we're actually in demo mode, and I hope I have given myself, oh good, over half an hour. I need 30 minutes for my demo and 10 minutes for questions, so we're right on track. All right, so I have 3 slides here that are all about the demos. I'm not going to keep coming back to them, but I'm just going to show them to you quickly. Here's the extended event slide, which supports our demo, and what's important here are the key multidimensional extended events that you'll want to make sure that you pick up, either in Profiler or in extended events. It doesn't matter, they're available in both. Second of all, what's really important here is our calculations. When working with tabular models, your storage engine or formula engine is not calculated the same way. But I should tell you at this point, you don't need to be grabbing screenshots because this webinar is recorded, and also I have a little treat for you all. I'm going to show you. I emailed to Liz this morning a zip file of everything that I'm going to be working on today, and that includes source code. So that SSAS package that we're going to look at, the Visual Studio solution is zipped up for you, and you can download it from this webinar site. If you want to thank me for that, I do take Marriott points in Southwest miles. Okay, that was a joke. I actually learned last week that if I go to work for Microsoft, for which I have no current intention, you're not allowed to give out source code. I didn't realize that. So I work for Pragmatic Works and I'm very happy about it, and I'm giving out source code. So here's your Visual Studio solution, and you can open that solution and you can make it your own to warm your multidimensional cache. The other thing I have for you are some T-SQL statements. So more source code. If you work with multidimensional cubes, here's your folder with all your goodies. If you work with tabular models, here's your folder with all your goodies. Both, whichever way you go, you have a T-SQL to create an extended event, stop, delete it, and restart it. And also reading from extended events. And we're going to go, you're going to have, in just a minute, we're going to actually be opening most of these up. But I know when I watch a webinar, because the slide deck is not always available to me, and especially the products or the objects that the person who is demoing, I'm madly grabbing screenshots and trying to replicate T-SQL scripts, and you surely do not have to do that. I also have a PDF of my slide deck that includes notes, which are rather extensive, and if you just like pretty pictures, you can use this one here. So all that zip file is ready for you to download it at any time and enjoy. With that said, let's get back to a quick slide deck. So here's extended events. We're going to focus on storage and formula engines. Here is extended events for tabular models. So we're interested in different events, and we have different formulas. So one thing when I introduced myself that I didn't talk about was the fact that yours truly has a blog site. So if you go to delorabradish.com, you will see some of what I'm talking about today I have also blogged about, such as database administration. And if you come down to the blog site, I do have some of these files ready for you to download if you want them from this location instead. And if you click on SSAS, I have written about monitoring there as well. And here's the formulas that we're going to talk about that are in the slide deck, and here are some SQL files. So that's just another tool that you have if you don't get the zip file or you work with a company that prohibits you from downloading zip files. I know that happens occasionally as well. All right, last, our third demo is going to be integration services. We're going to talk about these 7 steps. I have this running successfully. I'll try to give you as much information about this package as possible in the time that I have. And last, we have links to additional information. I want you to see that because right here, do you see this reference of profiler event numbers and names? This will help you with both profiler and extended events because when you look at the data, you will see that you have just a bunch of numbers and no descriptions. This is a nice, again, this is not my blog site, but I've actually used the source code from this blog site, and it was very, very helpful to me. All right, all said, let's jump over to SQL Server Management Studio. But first of all, let's talk about Profiler. All right, so 50% of you have created profile events before. So I've got 2 set up. One is for my multidimensional cube, one is for my tabular model. Whichever way you go, I'm going to spend less than 60 seconds on this because I want to spend most of the time in Management Studio, but you would say File, New Trace, you would point to your analysis services instance and you would pick tabular or multidimensional, whichever one you're most interested in. And I've got 50-50 that have worked with tabular models before, so this seems to be the popular thing. We'll just go with it. It doesn't really matter. The GUI is the same. I'm going to give it a name. So here's my tabular model profiler trace. What's important here is that I like to save it to a table, and immediately I get a pop-up window for SQL Server, the database engine. So what I have here, I've already done, is I've created a profiler for multidimensional, for tabular, and I also have extended events. I did not script these out for you because they are created automatically by SQL Server Profiler or SQL Server Management Studio. I did not create scripts for any of these. I just took what SQL Server did for me, and you can do the same. So it's really not worth my scripting it out and having you run a create statement on your own. But if I say connect to SQL Server, it actually wants to create a table that is the name of my trace. I already have a tabular model set up, so I do not need to do that. But what is important is what's happening here on events selection. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you show all events. The second thing I always do is I go to Organize Columns and I move this duration up. I do not know why it's buried towards the bottom and consequently out of my window when that's basically what I'm looking for when I'm troubleshooting long, slow queries. But all right, so I move that up. The other thing I'm going to do is get rid of, I'm not going to call it junk, but I'm just not interested in it right now. And what I'm going to do is come down here under Query Processing, and I'm going to pick up my key tabular model events. All right? So remember, we actually saw those. I gave those to you on the slide. There aren't that many, okay? But now if we come back to Profiler, I can actually show you my tabular profile trace that I already have set up. If I go to Properties, what my event selection looks like. So I've eliminated a bunch of junk. I tend to just look at my end events because my begin events are often replicated of my end and it's less for me to wade through. And then I've chosen my key tabular models. So here we go. So all is well. If I start this trace and I come out to Management Studio and I go to a tabular model, and this is where I wish I could share multiple monitors with you all. But basically, I start running some things. I should see my trace window. Yep, start to fill up. So I eliminated a lot, so therefore you're not getting all the connection and all that kind of garbage that, I should not use that word, all the extra event information that's not really of interest to you at this time. Now, for your pure amazement or amusement, because I was kind of curious about this as well, I wanted to know when preparing for this webinar, what were all of my multidimensional cube events, what were all of my tabular events, if I picked everything in the kitchen sink, which ones actually related to tabular versus multidimensional models. So I do have a little treat for you here. So if I open a file, we're going to see, again, I'm going to go to tabular models. When I did that, you'll see that if I do select everything, it's actually going to record 39 different events every time well, not every time, it depends what my tabular query is all about. But these events kept in this particular table only occurred because I was running tabular queries. So I know you'll get an audit login even with T-SQL statements, but I just wanted to see everything that was recorded if I selected everything, and there are 39 events. If I go to my subclass event, I do have 71 subclass events that are recorded if I choose to pull everything. So consequently, it's a fairly good idea to trim down what you want. But if the default most popular events aren't helping you, it's kind of nice to know what else you can look at that's going to tell you about that tabular query. Agreed? All right. So here's my profile trace running. I could do the exact same thing for multidimensional cubes. If I start my multidimensional cube and I come out here and I've got a multidimensional cube open, and I know how much y'all love AdventureWorks. And I just grab some whatever. I just start grabbing some measures and I maybe slice it by date. Look what's happening here. All right, so once again, I know this is being deprecated by Microsoft, but look how easy this was to figure out what's going on. I can do additional filtering for a particular NT user if I want, in case I'm on a production server where I have multiple cubes and users, but immediately I can understand, okay, I have this problem, my duration is horrible. I can look at my subcube verbose event. Don't let me scare you on that, because this is a lot of information. I'm not going to take time to really dig into this today, but I will tell you that the zeros indicate how many dimension attributes are in that dimension. If you see an asterisk, it has different meaning, and basically if you actually take time to digest this, it can actually be very helpful. If you are in the slide deck, let me see if I can, I'm on my tabular model slide. If I go back by my multidimensional slide in the notes, I actually do explain to you what those, here we go. I do explain to you what this all means. So 0 is the default member, a star is all members who return for an attribute. And basically what you can do here is you can look for missing aggregations. But I have to tell you honestly, for all the clients that have asked me to do multidimensional cube reviews and to help them with performance tuning, if I go back to the slide where I think of my 5 heavy hitters, my hierarchies, my partitions, my aggregations, my properly written MDX, and warming the cache, I have yet to have to really dig into this subcube verbose. When I focus on those 5 things, I generally, well, I'm going to tell you right now today, tomorrow might be different, but 100% of the time I've taken care of the performance problem, just looking at those top 5 things. But at any rate, if all else fails, you will want to look at this event. And this is applicable to extended events too. When we talk about profile trace or extended events, we're actually pulling the same information, but my graphical user interface is different. If you compare the tables, they're about 95% identical as well. All right, that is a 10,000 foot view and a quick trip into SQL Server Profiler. Let's spend the rest of our time talking about extended events because I have 75% of you where this is a brand new concept. So, extended events, and remember, you can do this. You don't need SQL 2016 to do this. What you need SQL 2016 to do is if you want to create a new session through SQL Server Management Studio. So, I'm going to go back to my tabular model instance again. I'm going to go to New Session. I'm going to spend a little bit more time, and I'll try not to move as quickly as I did with Profiler. So basically, I'm going to give this my new extended event session name for tabular models. All right, so far so good? All right, if I go to events, notice in Profiler it defaulted these for me. I actually have to handpick them. So, kind of a bummer, but it doesn't really take that long. I know I want my DAX query plan. I know I want my query cube end. I want this fellow here. I can choose these, but I'm not going to get them. My verbose event is multidimensional only. I am going to use my VertiPack for sure. All right, so once I've picked my events, and I have my DAX, so that's good enough for now because I'm actually going to show you how to script this out. You have a couple options here. I always send it out to a file. I can't think of why I would want to do an event stream or a ring buffer. Throw it into a file. Life is good. I have a default place to put that. I can do maximum file size. There are also a couple other things that we can do here. Because I am in demo mode only, I'm going to say no event loss. And I'm going to say I don't want any latency. I want every query to be recorded, and please get it done quickly. All right, with this done, remember what I told you? You cannot edit an event session. So at this point, to me, this is all this graphical user interface is good for, and that is to create a script. So if I click on script, it's going to send this out to a Management Studio window. We can only hope. I don't really like my churning green bar up there. We're going to set this little fellow aside. Oh, it's because it's waiting for me. All right, and it's going to create an XMLA statement. All right, and honestly, for those of you who don't like to work with MDX or XMLA, this isn't really too bad. All right, it's fairly easy to understand. What I have already created for you, and that is part of your zip file. Just want to make sure I'm on tabular here. I have multidimensional open, but it doesn't matter. because I could have chosen an extended event session from either, and I would still get a very similar script. What's going to change mostly are the events that I have selected. But this is in your zip file, and this is what I want you to see. So I never did save that event, right? But what I need to do is create and start that event is to run this code right here and simply execute it. As additional, thank you for coming, I also on this script gave you scripts for stopping that event. So I can just hit F5 on my keyboard and I've stopped the event. I can delete the event just as well. I can see, hey, how many extended event sessions are running. And this isn't that pretty, but if you scroll down, you can see that I do not have my profiler traces running, but this particular extended event session is not running. So let's start it. It's as easy as this. F5, life is good. Come down here, now what's going on? So basically, come on, let me change my window size. Here we go. Now this will be down here, and here we go. So it shows me it's running. If you don't want to work with XMLA, look at my time, it's 11:40. You can actually run MDX window. So if I come here and I say, let me see, I've got to get myself in MDX mode first. Tabular, file, open. I'm showing you this because this is just a lot easier to read. If you use the MDX script and you execute that, then you get what we all like best, and that's a nice little neat window that tells you that my tabular model extended event session is currently running. Notice my auto restart is set to true. That is a property that I actually added manually in this script because Microsoft forgot to put the checkbox in the graphical user interface in Management Studio. All right, let's remember, life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful, right? All right, so that is how to start, first of all, how to create, script out, and start event sessions. All right, it's all in your zip file, but now what we need to do, because this is actually pumping into a file on my hard drive, and I'm not able to see it real time like I can with Profiler, now I need to import it. And once I go through these steps, don't panic because you can actually use SSAS to do this automatically for you. So I say File, Open, and I'm going to merge extended event files. I know I didn't plan this, but I did plan this, but I didn't create this particular process. But don't give up on me yet, please. So if I choose my tabular model event, which they all end in XEL, and I say open, and I say OK, voila, I have data. Now, if I want to see all the data that I can see in Profiler, I have to come in here and move them all over. Are you with me? And then I can actually see something very similar to a profile trace window. But still, this is sitting here in a Management Studio query window, and I can't query it. So step one is to start your trace. Step 2 is to view your files. Step 3 is to import your file. So now, because I'm viewing an extended event log file, I have an extended event on my main Management Studio window. So here I'm going to export to a table. And that's where, again, I'm going to choose my database engine. I'm going to select the correct database. And what I'm going to end up with is data sitting in my extended event SSAS tabular table. All right, and this is what it looks like. So this is raw data from that XEL file. And something that is I'm not sure why in Profiler when you import data you actually get numbers, and in extended events you get event class names, but you still get subclass numbers. At any rate, however that works is fine. In the zip file I've actually hopefully try to make life a little simple for you. And I've already written for you a select statement that makes this data meaningful. So if I open my zip file, I'm going to read extended events for tabular models. All right. Oh my goodness, are we finally there? And the answer would be yes. So here we are. I've imported it. This is what's important to me. Who is running my query? All right, how often have they run the query? There is no query ID with Profiler or extended events, so I've cheated here a little bit, and I actually grabbed this idea from the Pragmatic Works Masters class, and I've created a query ID. But I can see how long my duration was in milliseconds. I can tell how much time was spent in my storage engine, how much time was spent in my formula engine, how many cores I used, and look what we have here. An actual text statement. So very nice. So if I should not be able to be proactive enough and get ahead of my slow running queries that my user calls me, I can run this extended event trace. I can actually pick up the select statement that he or she used. I can copy it out to an MDX window, and I can try to run it, change it, rewrite it, or at least it gives me a starting point. Are you with me on that? The other thing I'm going to do, if this was a multidimensional table, is I'm going to actually use this select statement to warm my cache. I'm going to do a count of how often a particular query was run, which the counts can go pretty high if you're using SQL Server reporting services versus ad hoc queries happening through Power BI Desktop or Excel. So I'm going to count how many times a query was run. I'm going to look for my longest running query, and I'm actually going to fire off this select statement after my cube is processed, and I'm going to warm the cache. So my first user in the morning, hopefully, and again, you're absolutely right, if he does not pick something that was in one of my select statements that I used to warm the cache, he's still going to have to wait. There's going to be a slight delay. You are correct. This is not a 100%, fix-all solution, but I will tell you from experience that warming your multidimensional cache helps tremendously. And this is a way that you can automate that process. Okay, that's extended events in a nutshell. If I'm looking at my time, I have less than 15 minutes, so I am going to have to jump over to Visual Studio, which I apologize, I thought I had left this open for us. It's all right, that will take me just a minute. All right, so again, you also have this source code, but I wanted to show you how it works. All right, so this is an actual solution that Pragmatic Works did for our customer, and I have turned it to work with AdventureWorks. A couple things you need to be aware of if you're new to SSIS is there are package parameters, so become familiar with that feature of SSIS. There are also lots of variables going on, but what this does, in a nutshell, it allows a user to come in and give the trace ID. It allows them to enter where their trace files are being saved, and everything else is pretty much a bunch of expressions. It also, obviously, you're going to need your XMLA statement, which, just for your dining pleasure, if you look at, let me get back here, look what I've given you. So you will find this XMLA in the SSIS package, but it is not formatted. So the reason that I pasted it in here is that if you do use the SSIS package and you're working on this user variable, you have a nice formatted example of what's actually going on. And notice when you, and this is exactly really the same create statement that you find up here, okay? What's different about it is that this is SSIS, so we're using some variables that we're replacing. So therefore this statement can have different file names, it can have different file sizes, it can have different trace IDs. So it just introduces some flexibility to what's going on with the SSIS package. Not everything is hard-coded, but I wanted to give you a formatted example of that XMLA because when you're in here in SSIS, it does look very messy and it puts it all on one tremendously long line. All right, so I've tested this prior to our meeting, and now I'm going to hold my breath because this is a demo. Nope, please don't expand. I just want to stop my tabular because we're talking about multidimensional here, and I'm going to clear my trace window because this is what I want you to see. As I run this SSIS package, you should see queries starting to run by over here on the left-hand side. I'm demoing this in Profile again because once again it is a live profile trace and I don't have to import anything to show you that this works. So what this did is it stopped my extended event session and imported my file from the place that I told it that it existed. It actually deleted the trace file because I don't want to import traces twice. And then I have a view where I go out and I decide what MDX queries that I want to run. So basically I'm looking for, in this view, my top 30 that have the maximum number of executions and longest run times. And then what I'm doing in this for each loop container is we're firing off each select statement against the multidimensional cube from which it was found, and I'm warming the cache. So if this starts taking too long, simply do top 10. If this is, only taking a couple minutes, you might want to do top 30. I don't know. It really depends what your query and usage looks like of your multidimensional cube. When this is complete and all these are executed successfully, it's going to go look at my history table. It's going to delete MDX queries. There's absolutely no purpose in warming your cache against queries that aren't being used anymore, correct? And then lastly, it's going to start my event session. And it's doing all of this by using these XMLA scripts here that I'm giving you. All right, so yes, there is a graphical user interface. Yes, you can do it manually if you want, but there is a whole lot of benefit to automating this with SSIS. Final notes about extended events. I think we all know that it's not a good idea to kick off extended events and have them running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? You all know, not the best idea. I am paying a price every time that I write to my file and I'm capturing this data. But I have to tell you, when there are strategic times that will be different for each company at month end, when I first roll out my cube, when I'm trying to, really monitor, is someone actually using all this hard work that was completed for them? Times that you actually want this running for a set period of time. If you have worked with SSIS and extended events, then what you can do is you can put this on a job schedule, and I'm going to assume that all that you can do with a deployed SSIS package. All right, that leaves me exactly 10 minutes for questions, and I know I tried to talk fast because I just wanted to leave you 5 or 10 minutes to talk back to me. And I don't think, though, Liz, that I can actually see questions. Can you help me with that?
I can. Let me pull them up. All right. Okay, when housekeeping cubes over the life cycle, it's good to know which dimension measures are not in use or most used. I see extended events could come in handy for this. Do you think extended events are useful for this?
I would say definitely yes, because if you're a T-SQL guru, you can parse out, let's take a look at the table. You can actually parse out of that select statement, right, anything that you want to. But you said something interesting to me. You're talking about multidimensional cubes. What dimension and attributes are not in use? Honestly, if I was working with multidimensional, that same information is in your query log. And it probably is a little easier to get to is all that I'm saying. And that OLAP query log that you use for usage-based aggregations, if you go out to CodePlex, you can download a Visual Studio solution that actually looks at that data set and actually tells you what measure groups and attributes it finds in that data set. Now Visual Studio can read it, and that's what it creates usage-based aggregations on, and all I'm saying is that you can't do the same thing through Management Studio, but there is a CodePlex tool where you can do that. It might be a little easier for you than trying to parse out a select statement, and then going into your metadata and doing comparison and seeing what's not being used. So you do have two options there. So I say yes, but.
Okay.
Next.
I've used Power Query to analyze profiler logs saved in XML format. Have you tried using Power Query and Power BI to analyze?
Oh, no, I haven't, but that's a great idea. That is a great idea. I tend to stick with Management Studio, but I love that idea, kind of. I do have some opinions about Power Query, but you know what? Whoever said that, I am going to give that a go. I appreciate the suggestion.
Okay. Using SQL 2016, what is your recommendation for RAM using Tabular?
That really depends on how big your data set is. So I don't really have a way to say exactly how much you need. It really depends on how big your data is. If you have gigabytes of data, you're going to need a whole lot more RAM than if you just have megabytes, right? Or if you have terabytes of data, you probably should be looking at a multidimensional cube and not a tabular model at all. So I have to see how much data we're talking about, and then I'll calculate it from there. I'm sorry I cannot give you a definitive answer.
Okay. You mentioned partition as one of the performance solutions for Tabular. How do you go about analyzing that as far as for multidimensional? There is the measure and usage base.
Okay, so very good question, and I want you to see something here. So one thing that my select statements are really focused on storage and query engine times, okay? But if you go into the raw data, trying to find my column, there is actually a column that gives you that gives you partition names. I'm trying to find it because I actually have to recognize it because it doesn't call it a partition name. The other thing is if I am in, so I would look in the data first. There is a column that will give you that information. When I am in Profiler though, and I'm using non-cache data, I also am going to see what partitions I'm using. Look at this. So glad you asked. See this? So I know I'm using Profiler just because it's easier, but everything you see in Profiler you're going to find in that table. But see how it's reading data from 4 different partitions? So that tells me I have partition scanning. With multidimensional cubes, that's probably because I forgot to fill in my slice property, okay? But I do use Profiler a lot to look at my partitions. The other thing that I use is that there are some definite best practices for partition management in both tabular and multidimensional models. And really what you need to do for multidimensional models is actually go out to your file system and figure out how big your partitions are. I don't want to scare you, but I have a blog post on that, finding actual partition file size on disk. It's not quite that easy to do, but once again, I'm giving you source code on my blog post, so have at it, and hopefully it will save you a couple days of work. But between looking at actual partition file sizes and looking in my profiler to see how many partitions I'm scanning, I can pretty much put together, and also if I look, pretty much I need those two things, and I can decide, okay, I also do the file size of my aggregations if we're talking multidimensional, which should not exceed 30% of my partition size. I'm probably way over answering your question. But basically, that's how I do it. All right, do we have time for one more? We have a minute.
Let's see. That was all the questions. I know a couple of you are still asking about the scripts and PowerPoint and all that. If you email me, Liz, it's the email that comes with all your GoToWebinar information. I can send it to you. Unfortunately, we can't put a zip file into the GoToWebinar panel for you guys to download, so just email me and I'll be happy to send it along. Also, as always, the session was recorded, so you'll receive an email tomorrow with the link to that. If you think of any questions after this that you didn't get to ask Delora, feel free to email me, Liz, and again, I'll be happy to pass those along. Delora, any final thoughts? Everybody's saying excellent and thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. If I know that GoToWebinar won't allow you to do a zip file, what I will do, folks, is do a blog post. You'll find it under SSAS. It will reference this recorded session with a link to Pragmatic Works, but I can put a zip file on my website. So I will actually attach a zip file down here at the bottom, and you can pull it from there as well, Liz. Hopefully that will save you a little bit of time.
Okay, perfect.
Okay?
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next session.
All right, thanks, Liz.
Okay, bye.